I'm Corey Hughes, and along with Pete Blows, we kind of pulled this thing together today. I'm in New Hampshire, he's in Vermont, and so it's very much an across-the-river kind of event. The tar sands pipeline in New England is something that pretty much every environmental group is aware of and fighting at this point. It is not a done deal yet in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. However, the pipeline permitting process has begun in Canada. And so I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that they're not going to bring the tar sands from Alberta into Montreal and let them sit in Montreal. You know, so I think it's just a matter of time before they really put the pressure on it to permit it through here. The presidential permitting process has already happened here in the United States. They do actually have the permit. They were given the permit in, like, I think 1999 or something. So what we're asking is for the federal government to re-examine that permit that has been granted and make them go through the process all over again. And the other thing that I want to say is this is also often called Line 9, not just Trailbreaker. Right. So we want to keep the words Trailbreaker, tar sands, and Line 9. Those are kind of our key terms. And Bridge Line 9. Yeah. Right. That's the other piece of it. Okay, good. Well, just so you know, there's a number of other events coming up very soon. February 17th is the big demonstration in Washington, D.C. I know there are groups that are organizing buses and things of that sort, so that's another one. And then in the spring, I very much want to put together another event on Earth Day, because I just think that is like the right day to do that, and it'll be a lot warmer.
We were talking about that on the way up, about doing something in the warmer weather, and I was hoping for Concord where we could do something right at the state capitol.
The next person that I'd like to introduce to you is my new state rep, and that's Marcia Hammond.
Thanks for getting out at -7 with a wind chill of, as they said, 30, 35 below. So we endured, and we crossed that river in style, and really appreciate the fact we are all sensitive to life, whether it be human life, but animal life, what's under the ice today, hoping that we all realize we're dealing with an invisible, I call it invisible. This pipeline is mostly underground, and a lot of people don't yet believe that there is a problem with it, that there are movements within boardrooms, people that we don't know, that are making decisions, and CEOs that have already made with a graph and with a line graph what their hoped for prosperity might be as a result of moving tar sands from Montreal to Portland, or reverse that flow. I think what we have to ask, how environmentally safe is this old pipeline? Have they really refurbed it? We know there is a paradox in this whole picture. We, especially today, suffered the cold, and our homes were heated all evening by whatever means we chose. But today we know that it took gasoline to get here, to be a part of this action or this demonstration. Fuel is our lifeline up here in the northern part of New England. So it is difficult to say, maybe we don't want fuel going through these pipes. But in fact, we have a reason why we choose not, and each one of you know this already. We know that we have a dependency for comfort and for life up here in northern New England. We do, and we have already agreed that we need to be less dependent upon Middle Eastern oil, that we also, most of us have chosen to change our lifestyles to try and accommodate what sacrifices that requires. And we also have recognized there is a finite supply of oil on this planet. We agree our lives are technologically more complex, and guess what? Most of us have welcomed that connectivity. So we are at the crossroads or the cusp of change, and yet, if we don't make the right decisions, future generations, my great-grandchildren will be suffering the consequences of our decisions today. So we do have an important witness. We do suffer from a distribution problem. Northern New England had a shortage of fuel oil, and someone else supplied it. So our country doesn't necessarily always meet our needs. I am a bit impressed by the writings of Philip Wagaman, a preacher of a Washington church and an ethicist, and he spoke to me about how we who are engaged so much both in politics and economics need to make sure that the goods are the good goods that we are moving about. If politics is central to human life, economics may be even more so. Our economy and our questions must address how we are serving our community, our region, our nation, the international community, because we are involved in a global economy that with not only technical expertise, it cannot supply the answers to our ultimate value questions. And I recognize this is the community that is asking those questions. You are asking about how is this going to impact not just our lives and our comfort level. Maybe some of us have somewhere in our retirement funds the very companies that are planning to run the tar sands through our neighborhood. A given set of economic policies might greatly increase our gross national product of the nation's economy, but if wealth is poorly distributed, what is good for the nation might not necessarily be good for all, and we are seeing some of that divisiveness now. Pragmatic policies are not to be judged on basis simply of what works, but rather what works for good purposes. The focus in economic life should be on what works for everyone, for the community as a whole, and what works to advance God's purposes on earth. So let's look forward to Earth Day, like 2013. Thank you.
Okay, I have here, I had invited Jeff Woodburn, who is our new state senator in this part of New Hampshire, to be here. He couldn't be here. He's in Concord today doing his job. But he did give me a statement that he asked me to read, so I'm going to do that now. What a great idea to host this demonstration on the Rogers Rangers Bridge and then gather at the Happy Star restaurant. It was at this spot that my favorite writer, John Steinbeck, in 1961, in his book Travels with Charlie, stopped and commented about the beauty of the villages and farmhouses he passed along his journey across Route 2. As a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I'm committed to protecting our North Country's environment, working forest, and cultural landscapes. We are all drawn to this place for various reasons, but few having to do with money, and all somehow connected to the land and each other. The Northern Pass has galvanized us to think about our land and communities very differently, and this new ethos is being expanded to include the tar sands pipeline. I have yet to be convinced that there is any upside to this project. In the North Country, we've long had a fragile balance between using and protecting our natural resources. It's never simple, but it must always be rooted in local control and common sense.
Yes.
I commend you for your concern, admire your activism, and wish I could be there with you. Thanks, Jeff. And the next person that we were going to have talk is Art Green, who is with the Ammonoosuc Trout Unlimited.
And a group of people that care deeply for our rivers and our environment. And of course, the rivers are, as far as these the pipeline, one of the most vulnerable spots along the pipeline. These river crossings take a tremendous beating during storms, and especially during the spring. And there have been several cases where actual citizens have discovered problems with the pipeline crossings where the pipeline company didn't know about it. There was something called VRAP, Volunteer River Assessment Program, and a a friend of mine who's also a member of Amanuensis Trout Unlimited was one of the participants that discovered a 2008 crossing at Stag Hollow, I guess across the Israel River in Jefferson. And they discovered the crossing was exposed and asked for repairs to be made. That was done, and then again that was discovered after Hurricane Irene. And of course Irene in New Hampshire was a relatively modest downpour, and again repairs had to be made. But one of the problems that, one of the deep concerns that our organization has is that these things, these repairs or concerns about the safety of the pipeline will not be discovered. And I think the methods that they normally use for discovering problems with the pipeline are pretty weak ones. So I represent a group that's been meeting regularly since there was a meeting in Randolph on November 14th. A large group of us attended that meeting from our Trout Unlimited group. And you probably know there were presentations at that meeting by the New Hampshire DES. It was a speaker from the Spill Response and Complaint Investigations section. Now they're used to investigating and responding to spills for regular oil which floats, and this material is completely different. It sinks. So many of us are concerned that they would know how to respond to a spill if there were one in this of this type of material. There was also a speaker from the Natural Resource Defense Council, from the Portland Pipeline Company itself. The president, Larry Wilson, spoke, and the American Petroleum Institute. And of course, the latter two were strong advocates for seeing this pipeline used for tar sands oil. Since that time, our Trout Unlimited group has become very active, and we have engaged the New Hampshire Trout Unlimited Council, and they're engaged in this, along with the New Hampshire Audubon Society, the Wildlife Federation, the Natural Resource Defense Council, the Appalachian Mountain Club, and then Eric Orff, who is a wildlife consultant, is actively involved. And a landowner in Randolph, where the pipeline goes right through his land. So we've been having meetings. We've been meeting personally and having regular discussions on the telephone. The main purposes of our meetings are to develop a rulemaking petition to the Environmental Protection Agency and to the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. That is to develop standards for transport of tar sands oil, should they decide to go ahead with this. And of course, those standards would also require response to a spill. Pray that never happens, but those standards really should be developed ahead of time. That is in process right now, and there will be a press conference presumably in early February when that is fully developed. We're planning to sign on to a presidential petition for relicensing, which was mentioned before, so that is actively being considered. And the National Wildlife Federation and the New Hampshire Audubon are very active, and they have attorneys who are investigating all aspects of this. We're encouraging town resolutions to make comments regarding this, obviously to inform the public, and that's what we're here for, and to inform New Hampshire legislators, including the governor, the senators, and the U.S. representatives. So we're very active in this and concerned. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Is there, who all here is connected with 350.org? Michelle, would you like to say anything on behalf of 350?
Really what 350, it appears to me what 350 wants us to do, especially regionally, is to focus on specific areas like we are right here in Lancaster, but to also disseminate that information so that we not only are just hyper-focused here in the North Country, but we bring that information down to the south, the east, and the western parts of the state to disseminate it so that they can all join our fight and say, you know, we don't want tar sands in New Hampshire, we don't want tar sands in New England, and we don't want tar sands in our nation. I think the most important thing that we need to remember about this is that this is a foreign nation that wants to utilize our landscape for their express financial purposes. We're not going to see any profits. None of this is going to come to us. And if it leaks, and when it leaks, because it will leak, we're the ones that are going to get stuck cleaning up that mess, and they're going to get off scot-free. So I think that that's really what we need to keep in mind, is that this is a foreign nation that has no reason to be in our backyards, and we need to protect not only our land, our water, and our sea, but we need to protect ourselves. And I also think that this is a turning point for us to go from the ways of old, which is the way of petroleum, and into the ways of new, which are renewable energy sources. This is the point where we're gone past the tipping point. We have to change. We have to adapt because we're running out of resources. We've contaminated our water, we've contaminated our air, we've contaminated our soil, and we've pumped the earth of all of its oil. If it isn't gone now, today, it's going to be gone very soon. We're past peak.
Michelle, I got involved against the tar sands pipeline, not because we're running out of oil, because everywhere from the Arctic to the China Sea, people are, you know, just crazy fighting to get the rights to go after more and more oil. But, you know, James Hansen, the nation's top climate scientist, has told us that if we're going to burn what they can mine out of the tar sands, it's game over for any kind of climate, for any kind of human life or what co-evolved with us.
It's time for us to move forward.
Right.
We need to move past petroleum. That's the point that we're at here, I think.
I had a conversation with Corey last night. I could see around us the demographics here. We're all older, and I think it's high time that we reach out to the younger generation, because it is their future. And if this oil spills, and we can't rely on the dependence that these people will clean up after they mess, because we all know they don't.
Some really nice people. You know, really, they're very sophisticated. And what they're doing here is they are protecting an investment that they have already made in the tar sands. And capitalists, whether you like them or not, you'll have to admit, will do anything to protect their investment. And so I just think, I hate to say it, but you have to understand that here in Lancaster, New Hampshire, we are engaged with the largest corporation in the history of the world, ExxonMobil. They are not going to give up. They are not going to be reasonable. And so we really have a fight on our hands. And we have to understand that this is going to be difficult. They will not necessarily listen to reason. And they will employ Lord knows what on their behalf. And I just think we need to know that ahead of time. It's us versus ExxonMobil, and you know that's unfortunate, but that's where we're at. I follow that up.
But I just spent like 6 years designing with an architect a house in southern New Hampshire that heats all of his water on waste heat. So it's the first solar thermal residential design in New England, maybe the world. And I'm not that special, you know. So if I was kind of curious about how my kids are going to heat their water a generation from now without oil, and I came up with a solution, you know, it's not like we can sort of scratch our head endlessly and look for alternatives and options. There are options out there, and it's important that, you know, we shape these policies with those in mind. Oh yeah, how many of you remember last summer in Springfield when that building blew up? That LNG pipeline blew up?
Yeah.
How many of you remember that? Most of you?
I didn't
Okay.
hear about it.
How many of you remember in the Yellowstone River in Wyoming when that pipeline went under the river and there's that whole river runs through it? It's like the same area. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two examples in the public consciousness about why pipelines might not be good, right? And what I'm saying is we're not making full use of those examples. Now, Exxon will conflate, lie, do whatever it takes to push their agenda forward, but we can't even connect the dots between an LNG explosion blowing up half of Springfield and what might not be a good economic idea for the North Country. You know, I think that it doesn't take as much as we might think. This event today, you know, whether we use the images from it or not, I don't know. Maybe it's part of a larger strategic campaign and that's good. I really can't say. But for me, what's important about this event is this group of people here coming together and becoming like the beginning of an affinity group. Because this little fight that we're involved with, this is long term. And you know, we need to begin to trust each other and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's not a lot going on here today from my point of view. Come in like 3 hours, it's like, what are we doing here? Well, we're having lunch. It's nice, but and I'm not ragging on it. This is great. This is part of a larger, you know, arc that we're all moving down towards. But when we have those examples in the public consciousness, you know, like a building blowing up or the Yellowstone River or whatever, you know, we've really got to seize those opportunities, you know, and I can't speak to the values of this particular town, but I'm sure many of you can, and be, you know, push it and be articulate about it. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to announce an event, but just first I want to say that the thing about this is it's not NIMBY. It's not in my backyard. That's not why we're here.
No, it's global.
We are here for an issue that's so much bigger than that. And, you know, I have read that ExxonMobil owns 76% of the companies in Canada that are doing this. So what you're talking about is really important. We occupy the Upper Valley, which is down near White River Junction and Lebanon, New Hampshire, are putting on the Tipping Point film, which is one of the best films on the tar sands. We're doing it Friday, February 8th. At St. Paul's Church in White River Junction. So if anybody is anywhere near there, I will be leaving posters over here on the table, and you can take them. And 350.org has the film. You can show it in your town. They will send it to you free.
All right.
And this very table at this very gathering has come up with an idea. We would like President Obama to really show us that he is going to care about climate change, as he said in his inaugural address. And we want him to reinstall the solar panels on the White House that they took down after Jimmy Carter.
And we write on the record.
So we are going to send around, we've already signed, please sign your name, your email, and where you're from.
And the letter should
And
go to
we're
Michelle.
going to try to get it on the Move On has a thing where you can have a petition that's on the internet. We're going to try to do that, but if not, we'll use this. And at least the people in this room will ask. What is it?
Okay, somebody just mentioned Vermont not having anybody speaking against this tar sand project, I think is what I just heard. Anyhow, in the course of researching different things, I learned a story I think is worth sharing, which is that the way Vermont got to have Vermont Yankee, is that the electric companies, remember CVPS and GMP that we used to have, both of them? They lobbied like crazy against Vermont making a deal with Hydro-Quebec. This is back in the very, very early 60s. Well, we couldn't be dependent on a foreign country for our power. So by one vote, making a deal with Hydro-Quebec was defeated and Vermont Yankee was approved. Okay, so fast forward to Peter Shumlin's election. Recall who paid for the inaugural ball? Green Mountain Power. CEO Mary Powell. Are we surprised that under Shumlin, Green Mountain Power got to merge with CVPS, that we now have one company delivering about 70% of our electric in the state of Vermont? Green Mountain Power was already owned by Gaz Metro of Quebec. Now, Green Mountain Power includes CVPS, so that's 70% owned by a Quebec company. And Enbridge, think Alberta Tar Sands, Enbridge has a 40% stake in Gaz Metro. End of story.
Good lead-in to that. That was perfect lead-in.
My name's Bernie Woods. I'm chief of the COASEC of the COAS. Natives in Newbury, Vermont, Haverhill, New Hampshire. And I'm quite surprised until I had a phone call a couple of weeks ago from Peter Blows of hearing anything about this and having a pipeline right here crossing our Connecticut River. Headwaters to everything all the way to the ocean here. My only thought was that I was standing with our indigenous brothers in BC who were fighting violently against this here, and to find that this is in our own backyard here. This is our ancestral homelands. All of our ancestors are buried all the way down this Connecticut River Valley. I'm wearing this today because it's a beautiful piece from our ocean. And it just reminds me of what we're about to lose here if these things go through here. And if anybody thinks there's anything going on that's safe and valuable about this tar sand crap, ask the people around the Kalamazoo River in Michigan for over 2 years now, 35 miles later, still can't clean it up. Still can't total the environmental impact this thing is having on us. Native people always talk about 7 generations, protecting for the next 7 generations, just not our grandchildren per se. So this has a tremendous impact on us here. The fertile valleys all the way down this Connecticut River Valley that feed the farms, the wildlife, the tributaries that come off there, the impact of one oil leak with this crap up here, excuse my language, this tar sand stuff up here, they don't know how to clean it up yet. And I can see if it benefited us in some way, but it isn't. It's all for the Asian market, crossing through all of our homelands here. That, I'm glad I was notified that this is going up, and I'm going to speak to all our other tribal brothers and sisters in New Hampshire and Vermont here about this, to get some more involved.
Yes. Are you going to hook up with the Idle No More?
I have been. I've been representing them through Idle No More programs and dances.
Awesome. Because I would love to participate in any sort of flash mob that you guys might plan.
Yeah, we just had one a couple of weeks ago in Concord, the Steelgate Mall.
There was one just down the other day in Burlington, Massachusetts, which was a really good place for it to be, I thought, because it's in a suburban area of Boston that is very, very wealthy, and it took them all by surprise. It was the absolute last place that anybody expected a Native American flash mob.
As well as Faneuil Hall.
Right, exactly. So I applaud that you're joining the I Don't Know More group, and any help that you need from me, please don't hesitate to
Well, I'm
contact
glad to know this is going on here. I had no idea. It's kind of embarrassing to be heading of a nation and not knowing what's going on in my own backyard here. So I applaud Pete for his contacting me here, and all of you for what you're standing up and doing here. And I hope I can be involved in helping to represent our side here too.
Absolutely.
It's not just indigenous people. This is all of
This
us.
is everybody. It's the whole planet.
It is the
People.
planet.
The tar sands are such an abomination for the entire planet, the way they're produced and as well as the transporting. Not to mention the whole way of life that's dependent on, petroleum.
Thanks. One, it's my understanding, and of course I'm not a petroleum engineer. I've never been to Canada for years. My understanding is that the refinery in Montreal does not have the capacity to actually refine all of the tar sands oil that would be coming into Montreal. So that's what I've read. It makes sense to me. And so it seems untenable that they're going to refine all of it and just ship refined oil through pipeline here. The second thing is simply by reversing the flow of a pipeline. Currently, one of the lines pumps crude from Portland up to Montreal. Merely by reversing the flow of a pipeline, you increase the chances of a leak. That's well understood by petroleum engineers. So that's a danger. The third thing is that the existing pipeline here is very old. It's been pumping oil for much longer than 30 years. It's been pumping oil for closer to 60 years. And not only that, the existing pipeline has had, as Trout Unlimited is very aware, even if they do nothing, even if they don't do anything new, the current situation, the status quo, is, in my opinion, unacceptable. The pipeline company has been cited a number of times in recent years by the federal government for failure to properly maintain the line, and they have had, I think, serious problems with the existing pipeline under current conditions. So even if all of what was on Vermont Digger was true, we still have, I think, a significant problem.
Right.
And my understanding is that the comments on Vermont Digger are not true. That the refinery in Montreal does not have the capacity to refine all of the tar sands oil. So, and finally, what I want to say is, I had said earlier that I wouldn't talk too long, but I am. What I said was that a company like ExxonMobil is very sophisticated, and the operative word here is very. These people are more sophisticated than you can even imagine. They're slick. And this type of disinformation is the kind of thing that they're very, very good at. Disinformation that is not a direct rebuttal of anything, but it's something that kind of, it's like an oblique rebuttal, you know. It's a very sophisticated thing. And it's not the kind of, it's something that ExxonMobil would be expected to do.
I mean, I have arguments with my family all the time about this stuff. I mean, yeah, well, I don't live up there. What do I care? You know, whatever. You know, as long as it gets us oil, I don't give it. You know, that attitude. How can I explain to them, because I'm no scientist, I'm not a geologist, I want to get them the information that it's appropriate and correct, so they can see the big picture, so they can see the honesty of it.
One thing I would recommend is to just do a Google image search of Alberta tar sands.
Oh, God.
And the pictures will make you sick to your stomach.
It's like a
Oh, they've
this is
I
the
don't
dirtiest way of extracting oil, isn't it?
What they are
This,
doing, I mean, to think they take a
the
beautiful
soil, they remove so much soil, it
forest
doesn't regenerate.
and just totally turn it into this hellish wasteland.
It
I mean,
looks
it's just,
post-apocalyptic.
I would be protesting tar sands whether it was a pipeline here or not.
Right, that's what you should be doing.
saying
Yeah.
Because it's an
Yeah.
abomination to this planet.
Right.
It
You're
just
saying
makes-
that's Alberta, and this is here,
So funny.
and what do we care? I think that's what you were kind of
what-
Pretty
saying.
much, that's what
Yeah.
that's what
Do they,
Yeah.
are they climate change deniers?
oh,
Well,
the world's flat.
that's where you have to start. I mean, I think that especially if they have experienced any of the consequences of storms, drought, I mean, the Midwest has been burning up this year. Food prices are going up because of this. Hello, you know.
We'll just blame it on Obama.
Right.
They'll just blame it on him. It's all his fault.
There's plenty of information out there. I'm sorry I can't give you the sources and the sites and where to go, but there is so much information out there. There was New Scientist, I think, has a site on that debunks all of the common misconceptions about climate science.
Right.
That might be a good place to go.
Well, I know that they recently had the space, what have they called? space station that took a picture of Nebraska. And it was flames. I mean, it was one big blob of flames, and that's up at the space station. And it's just sad, it's sick to look at that. And it's like, can you imagine the veracity of this thing? It's
About the
awful.
pipeline having been there for 60 years. There are actually 3 pipelines. There's a 24-inch, an 18-inch, and a 12-inch, as I informed. And only one of them is in operation right now to pump oil from Portland to Montreal. And of course, Montreal isn't going to need oil coming to it from Portland, Maine any longer, because they're going to be able to receive oil from their own country. This is a facility or a project looking for a market right now. See, you've got a big pipeline with no business. So that's why this is coming up the way it is. It's going to be very difficult, obviously, to argue that oil, regular oil, can't be pumped from Montreal to Portland. Tar sands is a completely different animal. So if you really want to look at the issue, it's tar sand oil. Now, of course, behind this are the environmental issues, which are a very big issue, internationally, and that's a bigger fight that I don't know if we can solve that with this particular one. But I think many of us are trying to concentrate on the fact that we don't want tar sand oil to be shipped through this area. Okay, and here's a pipeline that's looking for some business, and I don't think they have any real expertise in coping with tar sand oil and the consequences if something were to go wrong.